I should have been relieved when she asked if I was leaving tomorrow. Instead, something inside me went completely still. I had spent 3 months living in the small apartment above hers while I worked on a temporary renovation project in town. She was 46, quiet without being cold, and somehow always seemed to notice things I tried to hide. That evening, I was carrying the last of my boxes down the narrow staircase. She stood in her doorway, watching me. "You're leaving tomorrow?" The question sounded simple. It wasn't. "Yeah," I said. "Early morning." She nodded, but her fingers tightened around the edge of the door. "I thought you had another week." So did I. Neither of us moved. The hallway suddenly felt too narrow. For weeks, I had convinced myself that the strange moments between us meant nothing. The coffee she sometimes left outside my door. The way she remembered exactly how I liked it. The conversations that somehow stretched past midnight whenever I came downstairs. And the way she looked at me when she thought I wasn't paying attention. She had never crossed a line. Neither had I. But standing there with my suitcase beside me, I realized how much of my daily life had quietly started revolving around seeing her. She glanced at the box in my hand. "You're really going?" "I think so." Her eyes lifted to mine. "You think so?" I smiled awkwardly. "I don't know." For the first time, she didn't look away. There was something unsteady in her expression now. Something almost vulnerable. I set the box down. "Why does it matter?" She opened her mouth, then stopped. A long silence passed. Then she stepped closer. Not enough to touch me. Just enough that I could feel the warmth between us. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Because if you leave tomorrow." She stopped again. I waited. She looked directly into my eyes. "I don't know when I'll get another chance to tell you." I should have been relieved when she asked if I was leaving tomorrow. Instead, something inside me went completely still. I had spent 3 months living in the small apartment above hers while I worked on a temporary renovation project in town. She was 46, quiet without being cold, and somehow always seemed to notice things I tried to hide. That evening, I was carrying the last of my boxes down the narrow staircase. She stood in her doorway, watching me. "You're leaving tomorrow?" The question sounded simple. It wasn't. "Yeah," I said. "Early morning." She nodded, but her fingers tightened around the edge of the door. "I thought you had another week." So did I. Neither of us moved. The hallway suddenly felt too narrow. For weeks, I had convinced myself that the strange moments between us meant nothing. The coffee she sometimes left outside my door. The way she remembered exactly how I liked it. The conversations that somehow stretched past midnight whenever I came downstairs. And the way she looked at me when she thought I wasn't paying attention. She had never crossed a line. Neither had I. But standing there with my suitcase beside me, I realized how much of my daily life had quietly started revolving around seeing her. She glanced at the box in my hand. "You're really going?" "I think so." Her eyes lifted to mine. You think so? I smiled awkwardly. I don't know. For the first time, she didn't look away. There was something unsteady in her expression now. Something almost vulnerable. I set the box down. Why does it matter? She opened her mouth, then stopped. A long silence passed. Then she stepped closer. Not enough to touch me. Just enough that I could feel the warmth between us. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. Because if you leave tomorrow. She stopped again. I waited. She looked directly into my eyes. I don't know when I'll get another chance to tell you. Her fingers were still resting against my arm when the phone rang. She pulled away immediately. The sound seemed almost cruel in the quiet hallway. She looked at the screen and sighed. My sister. Take it. She hesitated before answering. Hello. I watched her turn toward the kitchen, lowering her voice. I couldn't hear everything, only fragments. No, he's still here. A pause. I know. Another pause. Her eyes found mine. No. It's not like that. Something tightened in my chest. She ended the call a moment later and placed the phone face down on the counter. Everything okay? She worries. About me? About everything. I smiled faintly. She didn't. You should go upstairs, she said. The words landed harder than they should have. Okay. I reached for the box again. Then she said, wait. I stopped. She stood there with both hands pressed against the counter. I wasn't telling you to stay because I was lonely. I didn't answer. I was telling you because. Her voice faded. I stepped closer. Because what? She looked at me for several seconds. Because you've become important to me. That was the sentence I'd wanted to hear. And somehow, hearing it made me want to run. I looked toward the stairs. I leave in the morning. I know. And you're still going to be here. Her expression changed. Probably. I laughed quietly, but there was nothing funny about it. Then maybe this is a bad idea. Maybe. Neither of us moved. She reached toward me again, but this time her fingers stopped just short of my hand. I closed the distance without thinking. Our fingers touched. She inhaled sharply. So did I. Then headlights swept across the living room wall. A car had stopped outside. She looked toward the window. Who is that? I turned. A car door slammed. Footsteps approached the front porch. She looked back at me. Neither of us spoke. Her hand was still holding mine. Then someone knocked on the door. The knocking came again. She slowly released my hand. Stay here, she whispered. She opened the door. A delivery driver stood outside with a package. Nothing dramatic. Nothing dangerous. And somehow, that made everything worse. After he left, she closed the door and leaned against it. Neither of us laughed. I thought you were going to say goodbye, she said. I was. Were. I looked at her. I don't think I can. Her eyes softened, but she didn't come closer. You're 24. I know. I'm 46. I know that too. She swallowed. You'll meet someone your age. Maybe. And you'll wonder why you wasted time on me. I shook my head. You keep deciding what I'll regret. She looked down. I've made enough mistakes to know how this ends. Then tell me. Her eyes lifted. I stepped closer. Tell me how it ends. She stared at me for a long moment. It ends with you realizing you wanted something different. That isn't what I'm afraid of. What are you afraid of? I looked at her trembling hands. Leaving and spending the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I stayed. Her lips parted slightly. For once, she had no answer ready. I continued before I could lose my nerve. I didn't fall for you because you're lonely. I didn't fall for you because you're older. I fell for you because somewhere along the way, you became the person I wanted to come home to. She closed her eyes. A tear slipped down her cheek. You shouldn't say things like that. Why? Because I want to believe you. The room went completely quiet. She wiped her cheek and looked directly at me. Then don't leave tomorrow. I stopped breathing for a second. She took one small step toward me. Stay, she whispered. I looked at her, knowing that whatever I said next would decide whether this was only a goodbye. Or the beginning of everything. I thought she was waiting for my answer. Then her phone rang again. She looked at the screen, and the color drained from her face. What is it? She didn't answer. Instead, she walked to the kitchen and sat down. I followed. Who was that? My former partner. I stopped. She stared at the phone in her hand. He's been trying to contact me for weeks. And you never told me. I didn't think it mattered. It matters if he's coming back. He isn't. Her voice was firm, but her hands weren't. I sat across from her. What happened? She looked at me for a long moment. He called because he heard I was seeing someone. My stomach dropped. Seeing someone? He assumed. Who did he assume? Her eyes met mine. You. Silence. I almost laughed from disbelief. But we're not. I know. She looked away. He wanted to know if there was another man. And what did you say? Her fingers tightened around the phone. I told him yes. I stared at her. You told him yes. I didn't want him thinking he still had a place in my life. The room seemed smaller. Then she whispered, but that wasn't the only reason. I waited. She finally looked at me. I realized I was tired of pretending there wasn't something happening between us. My heart started pounding. She stood and walked toward the window. I've spent months telling myself this was temporary. You were leaving. I would forget. Everything would go back to normal. She gave a quiet, almost embarrassed laugh. It didn't. I moved closer. Then what do you want? She turned. You. The word was barely audible. But I don't want you staying because you think you have to protect me. I don't. Then why are you still here? I looked at the suitcase waiting beside the stairs. Then I looked back at her. Because tomorrow isn't worth losing the person I want today. Her eyes filled again. This time, she didn't hide it. She crossed the room and took my hand. Then unpack your suitcase, she whispered. And I finally understood. She hadn't been asking me to stay for one night. She had been asking me to stay for her. I carried the suitcase upstairs. Not because I was certain. Because I finally stopped pretending I wanted to leave. When I came back down, she was standing by the kitchen window, staring outside. You really unpacked? Yeah. She nodded, but her eyes stayed on the glass. I need you to understand something, she said. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I. I've been alone for a long time. I know. And you're young enough to change your mind. I might. She finally looked at me. That answer hurt her. I could see it. So I walked closer. But if I do, I said, I'll tell you. I won't disappear. I won't make promises just because tonight feels intense. Her eyes softened. That sounds less romantic than I expected. I smiled. I've never been very good at romantic. She laughed quietly. Then the laughter disappeared, leaving something much more honest between us. I was scared, she admitted. When you first moved in, I liked having you around. Then I started waiting for your footsteps upstairs. I started making too much coffee. I started finding excuses to ask about your day. I noticed. Her eyebrows lifted. You did? I noticed everything. She looked down, embarrassed. I didn't want to need anyone again. You don't need me. She looked back at me. I want you. The words hung between us. I reached for her hand. She let me. No dramatic promises. No perfect ending. Just two people standing in a quiet kitchen, finally admitting that something real had happened. I still have work here for another month, I said. I know. And after that, I'll have to figure out what's next. So will I. I squeezed her hand. Then we'll figure it out together. She smiled through the tears gathering in her eyes. Together? Yeah. She stepped closer and rested her forehead against mine. For once, neither of us needed another explanation. Tomorrow, I wasn't leaving. And for the first time, staying didn't feel like giving something up. It felt like choosing her. The suitcase remained upstairs, half unpacked. My flight was still booked, but I never went to the airport. I called the project manager, explained that I was extending my stay, and accepted the awkward questions that followed. She didn't make it easy for me. And honestly, I didn't want her to. We talked about the things we'd avoided, the age difference, the uncertainty, the possibility that what felt right now might become difficult later. There were no guarantees. Just honesty. Her former partner stopped calling after she made it clear that chapter was finished. My work continued for another month, and during that time, we learned what we were when nobody was watching. Some days were easy. Some weren't. We argued over stupid things. We misunderstood each other. Once, I almost packed my suitcase again after an argument, and she simply stood in the doorway and asked, "Are you really leaving this time?" I looked at her. No. She nodded. Neither of us smiled. But somehow, that was enough. Months later, I still remembered that first question. "You're leaving tomorrow?" Back then, I thought she was asking about a departure. She wasn't. She was asking whether there was still time for us to admit what had quietly grown between us. And maybe that's the strange thing about love. Sometimes it doesn't arrive with a grand moment. Sometimes it hides inside ordinary conversations, shared coffee, unfinished sentences, and the person you suddenly realize you've been looking for every time you walk through the door. I stayed. She let me. And together, we stopped wondering what might have happened. We found out. If you enjoyed this story, let me know in the comments. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next? ****